The west of the UK swelters in the highest temperatures, and the heatwave could reach 35 Celsius next week. Wildfires have spread across parts of the UK. Firefighters are tackling 2 blazes in East London. There's been a sharp increase in the number of ambulance call-outs compared to this time last year.
I'm dehydrated, so I have to come in on gym to get fluids in me.
A struggle?
Yeah, it's just worn out.
And some councils have been forced to get the gritter lorries out to try to stop the roads melting in the heat. Also tonight, government claims of a £10 billion boost to the economy thanks to London 2012 are met with some scepticism. The row over photographs of the man accused of the Boston Marathon bombing. A police photographer leaks images of the moment he was caught.
All out stations from control, we have disturbance on Blakewood. Come in, Alpha 1, Alpha 3, Alpha 4.
An exclusive look inside Ashworth High Security Hospital, which treats some of the country's most dangerous criminals.
Well, he's gone big, he's gone high. Has he got enough on it? Oh, that's a good catch.
And England take control against Australia in the second Ashes Test at Lord's.
On BBC London, expanding aviation capacity, Stansted unveils proposals to create 3 more runways. And police break up a camp set up by Roma gypsies. Many are flown home at the taxpayers' expense.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. As the heat wave continues, it's the turn of western parts of the UK to experience the highest temperatures, with higher still expected next week. Wildfires have spread in parts of the country. In East London, 14 fire engines have been called to tackle 2 separate blazes. There's been a sharp increase in the number of ambulance call-outs in many areas as people struggle with the heat. And in a move usually associated with sub-zero temperatures, a number of councils have been forced to grit the roads to try to stop the tarmac melting. Ed Thomas reports.
This is the effect of all that heat. Another grass fire in the capital. Here, flames crept along the edge of Epping Forest, close to Snaresbrook County Court. London's seen 1,000 grass fires already this summer, twice as many as last year. And this was Dorset on Wednesday. Arsonists set fire to Heathland, close to this busy beach. It meant bathers ran for cover and more work for firefighters. Here in Blackpool, those who could enjoyed the sun, but for others, it meant a trip to A&E. The Royal Liverpool Hospital has now put into action its heatwave plan to help those like Michelle Langton who can't cope with the searing temperatures.
Yeah. I've just had a new kidney transplant, so I'm dehydrated, so I have to come in on gym to get fluids in me.
A struggle?
Yeah, it's just worn out.
And as the heat rises, so do the calls for ambulances. On the southeast coast, more than 5,500 calls were made last weekend, up more than 1,500 compared to last year. In London, the ambulance service has had 5,500 calls a day, up 1,000 on the previous year. And the West Midlands had a peak of more than 3,000 calls in a day, up 648 on the same time last year.
We've seen a recent influx of patients due to the hot weather, so we expect to be very busy and waiting times could go up. But if people stick to the simple advice, hopefully that will help.
But this summer sun is claiming lives. In Wales, 2 people have died in reservoirs in the Brecon Beacons, and in Northern Ireland, a 15-year-old boy died after falling into a river.
It is absolutely beautiful here, but what people don't particularly realise is with the depth of water that we've got, the water remains incredibly cold, even in these hot temperatures that we're having. So the cold water means it's very difficult to swim once you get out of your depth, and we're advising everyone to stay out of these sorts of pools of water.
And as the sun bakes all it sees, the gritters were brought out in Warrington to try to protect the roads from melting. And in Scotland, as sunseekers soaked up temperatures that topped 28 degrees, doctors were urging caution.
The really important thing is to avoid sunburn, because sunburn is a clear sign that your skin's been damaged, and that damage is what can build up over time and eventually turn into skin cancer in later life.
It is hot, And whether people like it or not, it looks like it's going to get hotter.
Well, Ed is live in Blackpool for us now. Ed, this weather obviously a joy for some, dangerous for others. And as you say, it's expected to get hotter next week.
Yes, Fiona, this heat wave is washing over large parts of the country now, and with it come these warnings to people to take extra care. It has been boiling here in Blackpool today, and it's going to get hotter. There'll be a slight lull over the weekend, but by next week, temperatures could top 35 degrees. Great for some people bathing here today, but for others, it's a real worry. The advice, as always, is to drink plenty of water, take out your sunscreen, and don't spend too long in the sun.
OK, Ed Thomas in Blackpool, thank you. The London Olympic and Paralympic Games provided a boost of nearly £10 billion to the UK economy, according to a government report. But the claim has been met with some scepticism from economists. While ministers say the money has come from additional sales, investment and new business contracts, all related to the Games, others have dismissed the figure as pure speculation. Our sports editor, David Bond, has more.
Can it really be a year since this place was packed with hundreds of thousands of people, all part of the greatest summer of sport this country has ever hosted? Today, the Prime Minister was back on the Olympic Park. Don't worry, he couldn't jinx anyone this time, for a celebration of volunteering, the first major event here since the Games.
There are now 1.4 million more people taking part in sport every week. Volunteering has gone up since the Olympics. Charitable giving's gone up. We're building Olympic stadiums and Olympic parks in Sochi. We're helping out in Rio. We've seen exports go up. We've seen investment in Britain increase.
So what kind of Olympic boost is the government claiming? Its report says £9.9 billion in economic benefit has been felt so far from the Olympics and Paralympics. This is said to include £5.9 billion of additional sales from trade missions and business. The problem is it's hard to know how much of this money might have been generated anyway. What is clear is that UK firms have netted around £1.5 billion in sports contracts, including work at next year's Brazil World Cup and the Rio 2016 Olympics. But not everyone believes the hype.
These numbers are highly speculative. Don't get me wrong, I think the Olympics were fantastic, but I don't think that we can take these numbers seriously as a measure of the net economic benefits of the Olympics.
Here on the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, it's hard to miss the impact from the Games. But the problem for the government isn't about stadiums or even economics, it's how to deliver on its biggest legacy promise. That promise was to inspire future generations to take up sport. Adult participation is already down by 200,000 since the Games, and despite investing extra money in primary schools, critics are worried that the policy isn't delivering.
When will we see the damage to the school sport programme inflicted by this coalition reversed and children once again playing sport in school as part of their school days, as part of their young lives?
The government wants us to believe that what happened last summer was more than just a great sporting party. But for all the bold claims contained in today's report, it will take years to judge whether London 2012 can deliver on its ambitious legacy vision. David Bond, BBC News, at the Olympic Park.
Counter-terrorism police have confirmed there was an explosion near a mosque in Wolverhampton 3 weeks ago. Evidence of a bomb was discovered during a search last night. It's the third explosive device targeting mosques in the West Midlands in the space of a month. 2 men have been arrested in connection with the attacks.
Information came to our attention that drew us back to a roundabout in Wolverhampton. Overnight we've done some detailed searches of that roundabout. We believe we found the seat of a third explosion that will have taken place, we think, on the 28th of June, and we're actively investigating all of those leads now.
Well, our correspondent Phil Mackey is in Wolverhampton. Phil, how was this explosion not spotted for 3 weeks?
It's a little bit embarrassing, I think, for the authorities because, yes, there were calls to the police 3 weeks ago and reports of a loud bang. Officers came, investigated and found nothing, but it was last night when counter-terrorism officers with greater expertise came to search the site that they detected signs of an explosion and confirmed that a device had gone off here 3 weeks ago, and this was just after they'd arrested those 2 men in connection with explosions at mosques in Tipton last week and in Walsall 4 weeks ago. They're still in custody tonight. It's been a difficult week and a difficult day for the Muslim community here, but at prayers earlier on they said that they would maintain their British resolve and continue with business as usual. Fiona.
Phil Mack in Wolverhampton, thank you. 2 men convicted of killing Alan Greaves, the church organist who was beaten to death on Christmas Eve, have been sentenced at Sheffield Crown Court. Jonathan Bowling, seen here on the left, was jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years after pleading guilty to murder. Ashley Foster, who was found guilty of manslaughter, was jailed for 9 years. Official figures show government borrowing fell in the last financial year, contrary to an earlier estimate made a month ago. Net public sector borrowing, excluding one-off factors, was £116.5 billion. That's a fall of £2 billion from the previous year, because the government's received more money than expected in taxes. The Treasury said it showed the economy was moving from rescue to recovery, but Labour said the country was a long way from a sustained recovery. New research suggests that increasing numbers of women in their 30s and 40s are dying from alcohol-related disease. Academics analysed trends over 3 decades in 3 cities, Manchester, Liverpool and Glasgow, and say the results should act as a warning signal about the long-term health of a generation. James Cook reports from Glasgow.
Every day, millions of Britons enjoy a drink. Consumption is actually going down, but women born in the 70s are unusual. In Manchester, Liverpool and here in Glasgow, it seems more are dying from booze.
Have you been drinking for a long time, Vicky?
The last 5 years I've become dependent.
Vicky Perry was born in 1972. Her stomach is swollen because of liver cirrhosis. She is addicted to cheap drink. And if she doesn't stop, she could die within weeks.
It's a death sentence hanging over my head. I switched from enjoying a glass of wine to buying a bottle of vodka with my morning newspaper. No one batted an eyelid. And they've become an addiction for me and a way of life.
And today's study does show a sharp rise in alcohol-related deaths in women. For those born in the 1950s, there were 8 deaths per 100,000 women by the age of 34. For the 60s, the figure was 14 per 100,000. But for women born in the 70s, that had risen to 20 deaths per 100,000. Some blame the culture when they started drinking.
This was a time that it was much more acceptable for women to drink, and much more acceptable for them to drink it to the excessive levels that's seen in men. But also around this time, alcohol was much more affordable and much more available.
So what's to be done? Different parts of the UK are tackling drinking in different ways. Here, the Scottish Government wants to introduce a minimum price for alcohol. But would that make any difference?
I think by increasing the price of alcohol in supermarkets would help, and keeping the price the same in pubs where it can be monitored and the consumption and sale can be monitored would potentially help.
They need to probably increase the minimum price on brands like cider or, like own brand alcohol.
I think if people are going out to socialise, you're obviously going to get pubs having deals on at the weekends, and they're going to promote it more. I don't think it will change much at all.
That's also the view at Westminster, where the government has shelved minimum pricing for England and Wales. The Home Office insists it's cracking down on cheap booze with other measures. Different approach, same aim, to save lives in the next generation. James Cook, BBC News, Glasgow.
There's a growing controversy about photographs of the man accused of the Boston Marathon bombing earlier this year, Dzhokhar Zavaev. The American music magazine Rolling Stone has featured him on their front cover using an image which critics claim glamorises him. In response, dramatic new images have been leaked today by a police photographer of the moment Zavaev was caught. I should warn you that Nick Brandt's report contains some disturbing images from the start.
The world is now seeing what police snipers viewed that night. The back garden of a Boston suburban home, where Dzhokhar Tsarnaev tried to hide. The images capture the full drama of the chase. With the red dot of a sniper's rifle illuminating his forehead, he knows there's no escape. These pictures were leaked by a disgruntled police photographer, Sergeant Sean Murphy.
Hey guys, good morning. We're going to start with those extraordinary new pictures of Boston bombing suspect Jahar Tsarnaev. They paint a very different picture from the cool, composed young man with the artfully tousled hair gracing the cover of this week's Rolling Stone magazine.
The officer was furious with the magazine for presenting what he sees as a glamorized portrait of terror. In Boston, there's been outrage. There, Tsarnaev is facing 30 charges for the bomb blast at the finish line of the city's famous marathon, which killed 3, including an 8-year-old boy.
Why are we glorifying a guy who created mayhem in the city of Boston? I want to be in touch with the publishers and tell them how I feel about it.
Many agree that a suspected Bond suspect is being depicted as a kind of rock and roll outlaw.
To put a person like that that's considered a terrorist, I don't think it was a good idea.
I did not know that was the guy who did that, that did that terrible thing. I really didn't.
You thought it was a rock star?
I did. I really did.
Some retail outlets have refused to sell the magazine, but that's not the only reason it's hard to find. Rolling Stone's controversial cover may have provoked a backlash, but in some places it's clearly driving sales. Every single newsstand that we visited in New York today has completely sold out. Perhaps that was the intention all along. But this soft focus image has hit victims of the Boston bombing hard. Nick Bryant, BBC News.
The time has just gone 6:15. Our top story this evening. As the heat wave continues, wildfires spread across parts of the UK and temperatures are expected to rise further next week. Still to come.
He deserves a birdie, and he's got it. Well done, Lee. Third birdie.
Lee Westwood is Britain's great hope at the Open as he storms up the leaderboard.
Later on BBC London News, the capital delivered a successful Games, but did the Olympics boost London's economy and create jobs? And sharing their roads with cyclists, why some Surrey residents have had enough.
The BBC has been given rare access to Ashworth High Security Hospital near Liverpool. It treats some of Britain's most dangerous and disturbed criminals. Among them, the Moors murderer, Ian Brady, who lost his legal bid last month to be transferred to a prison. He's been at Ashworth for 28 years. The hospital can hold up to 228 men. It costs £300,000 a year to keep each one at Ashworth. For the first time in 20 years, the hospital has allowed TV cameras in to film staff and patients. Our correspondent Judith Moritz has this exclusive report.
Never seen before, the gates, cameras and alarms that keep Ashworth secure around the clock. This isn't a prison, it's a hospital. But those who live here are such a danger to the public, they're kept under high security.
From the exchange, Zulu 14
Every one of the 190 patients here at Ashworth is individually monitored 24 hours a day. They can all be tracked on camera and their movements around the site are all controlled. As we filmed, a sudden alert.
Romeo 7, permission granted, 0. All out stations from control, we have disturbance on Blake Ward. Come in, Alpha 1, Alpha 3, Alpha 4.
This happens on a daily basis. Ashworth's patients have some of the most extreme mental illness in the country and can be violent.
03 Blake secure.
It's not what people make it out to be, a dungeon and stuff like that. It's nothing like that.
We were taken to meet Stefan, the first patient inside Ashworth to give a television interview in 20 years. He was moved here from prison in 2008.
I thought people were trying to kill me. I was paranoid. I had a lot of anger. I was frustrated. Now I'm on the right medication, I can see a whole different change in me.
Patients move around under escort. The most seriously ill are only locked in their rooms for their own safety. The majority of the men here, like Ian Brady, have paranoid schizophrenia.
He's a patient like any other patient. He has problems and has needs, and that's what we're here to address.
Phil Knight has been nursing here for 25 years and is used to the volatile behaviour of the patients.
We've had a number of staff who've been severely injured and a lot of staff on particular wards. It's recognising the fact that the patients have very little control over that, and it's the severity of the illness, which is probably not, experienced in many other places in the country.
In the 90s, 2 inquiries heavily criticised Ashworth, but this year inspectors said that all standards are being met.
I'm not complacent. I know in the news there are very well-esteemed organisations experiencing very significant failings in care. And I think the transparency is the key to assuring the public that we're providing high-quality treatment.
There are some tranquil corners here, like the gardens created by the patients. But you can never forget where you are. And for those inside, the outside is a world away. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Ashworth Hospital.
The government has unveiled what it says are the world's most generous tax incentives for the shale gas industry. Ministers want to temporarily halve the tax on a proportion of income generated through the future exploitation of underground gas reserves. Green campaigners have criticised the move, saying fracking could wreck communities and increase climate change. Our industry correspondent John Moylan reports.
The government wants to see a lot more of this: exploratory drilling for shale gas. This was the energy firm Quadrilla in Lancashire 2 years ago. The problem is that so far there's been lots of talk but very little action. Now the Chancellor hopes that will change.
Britain is going to be at the forefront of the shale gas revolution. This is a potentially enormous new supply of energy for Britain. We want to make sure we make the best use of it so that energy bills for families are lower and for businesses are lower, that we create jobs, that we benefit the communities.
So to get the industry moving, the usual tax rate of 62% for gas companies has been reduced, temporarily at least, to just 30%, to take into account the large setup costs involved. Now, the long-term impact on all of this on our energy bills isn't certain, but this week one estimate put wholesale prices 24% lower by 2030 if the industry really does take off here and elsewhere. That's what's happened in America. The controversial fracking process, which involves injecting water, sand and chemicals at high pressure into rocks far underground, has seen gas production soar and prices plummet. Tax incentives played a role there, and the industry believes they'll work here too.
We really need to get the exploration phase started. The tax cuts that have been announced today are to incentivise the industry. Costs are likely to be higher at the early stages as we build up the supply chain in the UK and develop the industry further.
But environmentalists are outraged by the move. They say fracking causes earth tremors and could pollute water supplies. Today, one group branded the tax breaks a disgrace.
It's absolutely shocking that the government is handing out tax breaks to the shale gas industry when we need to be moving towards a carbon-free power system. So we think it's completely the wrong direction for our energy policy. We should be investing in renewable energy and cutting energy waste.
These tax changes could see around 50 wells drilled in the next 2 to 3 years. It could be the start of a whole new industry. John Moylan, BBC News.